Welcome to the show, IB Nation Sports Talk, off and rolling on a Wednesday. He is Mr. Vince DeDario. I am Sir Sean Stiers. Gave myself knighthood.
As I say, you knighted yourself. I'm impressed.
Right.
Apparently, that lot more went on in that vacation than I thought.
Hey, maybe so.
I didn't realize the king had stopped by the old West Coast.
You never know. You never know. Toons is checking in. The cat who could drive a car. He wants to know if this is live, doesn't see or hear anything.
We're here now.
You are looking live.
That's right, Brent.
Sports Talk and the Mailbag show. But I know Brian and Trevor just finished up a little bit ago with their show, and that means that we're taking the driver's seat now. And it is a mailbag day.
That's right.
There are several questions in the mailbag. If you have questions for the mailbag, throw them in there.
I didn't look at any of them. It's all going to be a giant surprise. I like when I don't have time to formulate my answer. I like surprises. I like to be on my toes.
Well, I'll just go ahead and surprise you. With the first
here we go.
Then let's just jump right in.
All
Mark
right.
wants to know, have you noticed, by the way, the avatars are now square and a little bit bigger on the screen?
Yeah, so
you can actually see people's faces?
See, we could go back to the bubble, or you could stick with the block.
Oh, did somebody change the format?
So you can we can go even bigger
make
here.
it even bigger
with the classic or the minimal. So those are our options right there. I mean,
I kind of like the first way that's
this one.
I
Okay,
like this way
because we can ask the people, what they like better.
It's just enough, but it doesn't take up half the screen. I thought
the other one,
a couple of those ways took up a lot.
The other one was mad. This was boom.
Yeah, that's too much.
That's
too
a
much.
lot right there.
Whew. Mark looks like a nice guy, but I don't need to see that much. All right, so from Mark, if the USC game goes away, working a scheduling arrangement with the ACC to have Miami and Stanford alternate years as an away game Thanksgiving weekend to end the season, pseudo back to the 80s. So this is kind of like a we in, we out question, the way he worded it here. What do you think about that? So instead of USC and Stanford, you would just sub in Miami and alternate their Thanksgiving weekend.
I am out, but I'm only partially out because I'd be okay. I'd be okay if it was Miami. But then you just signed a 12-year contract with Clemson. Put them on Thanksgiving weekend on the alternating year. I don't want to alternate Stanford. I'm sorry. I just they need to be in the regular rotation.
But you don't have a choice about that one right now, Vince. That's the problem.
What do you mean?
They're in the rotation.
Well, they're in the ACC rotation. They're not in the every single year rotation.
I thought that they were a permanent fixture still.
I didn't think so. I thought that.
Pretty sure that's what I heard.
It's been a while recently because I thought it was up for debate. And anyway, I'm out because I don't want Stanford.
At one point it was, but I thought that we got some kind of word that it was going to continue.
I don't want Stanford. I would rather have if we're sticking with the ACC opponents, I would have Clemson and Miami alternating the Thanksgiving weekend. That's what I would do.
This is going to have to be something that I check on.
I know
later on. I thought that Bernard Muir, the Stanford, I guess now former Stanford AD, had said that it was going to continue. They didn't necessarily, I don't think, make some
grand
big release or anything like that, but I thought it was going to continue. I wouldn't mind it. I have a feeling that, like you said, Clemson maybe drops in there, and that could be I guess the question is going to be, does Clemson have South Carolina Thanksgiving weekend? Because Thanksgiving weekend is typically rivalry weekend. It's like when you have
good point,
the Iron Bowl. I believe Clemson and South Carolina have typically played when Notre Dame is not playing USC. I believe USC plays UCLA that weekend. So that would be the question. Is Clemson going to be bound to play South Carolina that weekend?
Which makes sense.
You'd basically replace LA with South Beach if you did the Miami thing. I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world. But the other alternative is just to find some kind of rotation of opponents to plop in there. Now, again, one complication would be, because that is traditionally rivalry weekend, you could have a lot of schools who are playing their rivalry games at Thanksgiving weekend and unable to get out of that.
Well, I just checked the Clemson calendar schedule, like for the future, and they do play South Carolina every Thanksgiving weekend. So that one obviously would be out. But the other piece of information is that Stanford is not on Notre Dame's schedule starting next year.
Okay.
According to the site that I'm looking at, the FB Schedules site that always has all the future stuff. So there's still hope that Stanford will not be on the schedule next year at this point. So I guess Clemson would be out then. And if it has
a lot of instability, like losing
I know.
Stanford and USC potentially
That's true.
the same year.
But again, I look at it as the glass is half full. Now you've got opportunities to do something different. Maybe Thanksgiving weekend is where you permanently move the Shamrock Series. And so now you can go to Vegas, or you could go to LA, and you could go to wherever and play I don't care who, because you're in some awesome place.
Just pick up a game and it's cool. You're doing something
right.
different.
It doesn't have to be the same teams every single year. Like I think the same teams every year kind of thing is almost unrealistic anymore with the way things are going. I think now, like
that's the unfortunate thing.
Yeah, because
maybe it just ends up being some random ACC team every Thanksgiving weekend. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, something. I mean, obviously they're going to play, and it just might have to be where Notre Dame's not playing a rival that weekend.
And like this is, if you want to remain independent, you've got to be able to adapt and go with the time. So a lot of things are going to be out of your control.
That's a great point. It's a great point. So like I said, look at it as a positive. Like, let's see how we can do this. Let's have some fun with this thing, and let's be creative. That's what I would say.
Good call. Will Bryce Young have a breakout year this season?
I really do think he will have a breakout year this season. I think that he is poised physically. I think he got a bunch of reps last year, both on special teams and on defense, where, he's going to take a more prominent role this year. Now, here's the other thing. He's probably not going to be a starter, but he's going to get a lot of reps, right? So he doesn't even have to be the headline guy. He can just go out there with reckless abandon and just be a dude. You know what I mean? That he doesn't have the pressure of being a starter. He just goes out there and just makes plays. Like, that would be my definition of a breakout year for this year, is every time he's on the field, you got to account for 30, and he just goes out and makes plays, finds a quarterback, finds a football, that kind of thing. And then in 26, now he's your starter. Now he's a leader. He's all of those things. Like, I don't think he's going to have the pressure of leadership and things like that as a true sophomore. But he's going to get lots of reps, and he's going to make lots of plays. So in that regard, yes, I do think he will have a breakout season.
Yeah, I mean, even if he's not the starter, he's going to play a significant role. We're going to see a lot of defensive ends, and it feels like maybe he might not be the first and second down defensive end all the time, but when you got a guy with his kind of twitch and ability
just
off the edge, out there in passing situations and that kind of stuff, absolutely right. I think he's going to have a really big year, like very, very promising true freshman year that he had. And I think that with that season of experience and the extra muscle that I would expect that he's going to come in with this year, I think this will definitely be a breakout year.
Because he's still filling out, man. Like, his body, like, he was still growing as a freshman. And once he kind of hits that, that mark of stopping to grow, now he's going to grow like this, and he's just going to get stronger and faster. And I mean, good Lord, look out.
Good googly moogly. What's your preferred starting 5 linemen on offense? And what is your 2 deep? Man, I don't know about the 2 deep.
I don't know that I'm prepared to go too deep at this point. Now, I'm going to go my preferred, and I'm going to go with guys that are healthy, because
that's the problem.
That I can't say, because like when you're just looking at guys on paper, Gerby Lambert's my starting left tackle, but he's hurt, and so I can't put him in the lineup, and therefore now Anthony Knapp is there, right? So what I think is going to be the starting 5 going into fall camp, I think it's going to be, Anthony Knapp. I think it's going to be Billy Schrauth. I think it's going to be Craig.
Ashton Craig at center.
Yep. And I think it's going to be Jagasaw at right guard, and then Emil Wagner at right tackle.
That's it.
And that's a hell of an offensive line, it's a hell of an offensive line. So that's your 5 best. And that's when I asked Marcus Freeman the other day about why or what went into the thought process of Charles Jagasaw being a guard, And he basically said he could play guard, he could play tackle, he could play center. He said, but he's one of our best 5. And when we have our best 5 out there, his best spot is guard.
But didn't he kind of roll his eyes at you when you asked him the question?
He did not.
That's what I heard.
Excited.
So my sources are wrong? My sources are wrong on this?
I mean, I wasn't looking lovingly into his eyes, and so I don't really remember his eyes. I'm not going to lie to you. I was too busy wanting to make sure I got all the words out without stepping on myself, which I did. So.
You were talking very slowly, I noticed.
Yes.
You were talking. I listened to the whole thing. You were talking very slowly, making sure it all came out.
Yes.
It sounded good.
I was very cognizant of my tone and pace of speaking at that point. So I was just happy I got all the words out. So
Marcus.
Buddy. Can I call you buddy? Can I call you friend?
Yeah, so I agree. Like that's with Gerby Lambert sideline for whatever extent. I think it's going to be either him or Knapp at left tackle. Really, I think that's the only question remaining. Everything else,
I agree.
Shrouth, Craig, Jagasaw, and Wagner, I think are pretty much set in stone. Those other 4 guys. I think the only question is going to be what happens between Knapp and Lambert. You know, and like you said, as long as Lambert is injured, it's 100% going to be Knapp, I think. So.
Oh yeah. I mean,
but what happens in the 2 deep? I mean, they're like we saw some different guys out there in the blue gold game. I think that's going to be that's where you're going to see the most movement over the course of training camp is who's moving into the 2 spots and
what positions? Because
exactly.
There's going to be guys that are going to be cross training at a lot of different positions, and I think that will come into play. And so just because a guy is quote unquote backing up one position, that doesn't mean that he wouldn't be the first man in at another position, to be perfectly honest. So, I think you're going to see, let's see, I'm looking at the offensive linemen that are on the team. And I mean, obviously Sullivan Absher is probably going to be that 6th man or pretty darn close to it. Gerby Lambert, when he comes back healthy, will be in that 2 deep. As far as what the rest of the 2 deep look like, we're just going to have to kind of wait and see. I just don't know. I just don't know the answer to that. Off the top of my head, I mean, Devin Houston, I think, is a big old body that you would want to get out there potentially, but he's still learning the position.
He's an interesting one, and we didn't see anything from him in the spring that said he's taking to it right away. That doesn't mean he's not going to take to it, but they obviously moved him from defense to offense, and USMA and Salty are saying USMA says Will Black. Salty says Black Will. Okay. I don't know if he's just a little dyslexic today.
Look, we haven't even seen Will Black in
got a little bit of the
uniform.
sacrament down there in Virginia or what, but
we haven't seen Will Black in a Notre Dame uniform. I'm not ready to put him in the 2 deep when I haven't seen him do anything. So
everybody was willing to put Gerby Lambert in the 2 deep last year before he showed up. So
when we saw him, and it was like he's not ready for that yet. You know what I mean? And that could potentially be the case here as well. So look, I've heard really, really good things about Will Black, and that's awesome. And USMA 7 he doesn't care. He's a 5-star. Well, so is Snead. He's a 5-star too, and he didn't see the field for quite a while and barely sees it now. So just being a 5-star doesn't mean anything. I'm sorry. That does,
Yeah. I thought USMA says he's being spiteful. I didn't read spite into it, but I thought he was being at least a little sarcastic.
Okay, fair enough. Let's.
I don't care. He's a 5-star.
Yeah, fair enough. I love it. Okay, okay, you're right. Please apologize. I took you at your word. It's hard with text, man. Like it's hard. Yeah, we just need to see him. I just need to see him do it. Like he could be. Maybe he's going to be pushing Anthony Knapp for the starting position. The way Marcus Freeman's eyes lit up when he talked about Anthony Knapp, though, that's a long shot. I'll just say that.
Seeing this, like Mike is saying, can't believe they are choosing guard for Jagasaw. Just dumb. And I think it just goes down to the whole, because I think that he said in the answer that he had to you, it's about getting the best 5 guys on the field and putting Jagasaw at right guard, especially if there is no Gerby or even if Gerby Lambert were healthy. I think that's how you get the 5 best guys on the field. And they've seen him in action in a college football playoff semifinal against a very physical defensive front in Penn State after not playing all year because of the injury, and you saw how he could perform, and that's why they feel so confident about him at guard. And by doing that, whether it's Knapp or Lambert, you're going to get one of those guys at left tackle, and again, the other three spots are all set, and that's how you get the five best guys out there, essentially, by putting Jagasaw at right guard, because I don't think that Lambert or Knapp, even though maybe like with Knapp specifically, a lot of people feel like maybe he could be a better interior lineman than out there at left tackle. That's obviously not the way they feel. That, like, if you switch Jagasaw and Knapp and you put Knapp at right guard and Jagasaw at left tackle, I don't feel like they feel like that is the best combination for the team. And that's why you've got a bigger, more physical guy like Jagasaw there at guard.
That's exactly right. That's the way the coaching staff sees it, and that's the way they're going to go with it. I mean, they obviously feel those are the five best guys for the job, and they're going to put them in the best position to be successful. And we have been not we, me, you, et cetera. We as a Notre Dame nation, I guess, have been very hard on Anthony Knapp as a true freshman playing left tackle, right? He got markedly better from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. And, everybody's got to at least admit that much. And now he's got an entire offseason where he's practicing at tackle. He had an entire spring. He's going to have an entire fall camp. Let's see what he looks like by the time we get halfway through fall camp. And maybe people will be a little bit more willing to see Anthony Knapp at left tackle. You know what I mean? Whoever's at left tackle, you are going to have a dominant middle of this offensive line.
Absolutely.
Guard to guard. I mean, I'm running.
Might be the most dominant since they had, since maybe 2012, in terms of the guard in the interior, when they played in the national champion, like Chris Watt on that team, that was a pretty dominating interior offensive line they had.
They're going to have the middle of their offensive line is going to be legit.
Yeah.
If you keep those three there. So,
and just with the size of these guys, the sheer size, because Golick Jr. playing center on that team, that guy probably had to eat 8,000 calories a day just to keep up the frame 100%. That he had. They're just gonna be so big and physical from guard to guard. Guard center guard this year.
Charles Jagasaw right now is 6'7", 320. Let's see here. Ashton Craig is 6'5", 312, and Billy Shrouth is 6'4", 302. That's just some beef in the middle that is going to dominate people. He just is, or they just are. Excuse me. And it's going to be fun to watch.
Good question so far.
Yeah, man. We got 2 questions in, and we're still 20 minutes in.
Yeah, no kidding. There was another one there. Joseph had another USC/schedule question. Assuming the USC game is gone, how does Notre Dame maintain a presence on the West Coast, particularly in the Los Angeles area? Would UCLA be a possibility? Do not think the Stanford game applies. I would agree with that last.
Me too,
part.
Because
we've kind of all been in on that. Yeah.
For people that are unaware of geography, going to Northern California is not the same as going to Southern California as far as having a presence. Now, this is 2025, and as long as you are on the West Coast someplace, I think you're okay. I think UCLA absolutely is a possibility, or should be a possibility if they are not already. And I also think that LA has a really nice NFL stadium that you can bring other teams to, and Notre Dame could essentially be the home
Jamrock series.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of creative ways that you can have a presence on the West Coast. I don't think it's as crucially important to be in LA every other year the way it used to be, just because of the ease of travel and all of those different things, and the ease of watching Notre Dame games. Notre Dame is accessible every single week, right? And so I still think it's important to get out to the West Coast, but not necessarily LA specifically, but you still want that to be a landing spot every once in a while. You know what I mean? So there's still possibilities there. There's still opportunities there. UCLA should absolutely be a possibility, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think UCLA is definitely a team that you would want as part of your rotation. Again,
Right.
that doesn't have to be an annual opponent, but if you rotated a home and home with UCLA like once every 4 to 6 years or
Yeah.
something like
Right.
that. So you play them a couple of years, you replace them with somebody, so like you get, instead of Coliseum, you get Rose Bowl and South Bend, and then maybe in the meantime, like in the years, then the next year, or what, like, again, if UCLA is
If
part
you're
of
just
it,
doing
then
like a home and
yeah,
away.
then like you're
Yeah.
doing a Shamrock series every
Right.
4 or 5 years at
Yes.
SoFi Stadium. And
Yep.
like
100%.
USMA was saying, or yeah, USMA was saying Arizona State or Arizona in SoFi. Those would be perfect
Yeah.
opponents out there. Really, like most of the pack, or not the pack, the Big 12, like Colorado,
Right.
like you can love or hate Deion Sanders, but do you think Notre Dame and against Colorado with Deion as
You'll
head
get
coach would get a
eyeballs.
lot of attention
You
out
know it.
there? I do.
You know it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
And for
again,
that matter, like that's an opponent, because Colorado's kind of a school without a rival right now because of the fact that they've bounced around conferences. Like for a while, mid to late 90s, Colorado and Nebraska was becoming a huge Big 12 rivalry.
Right.
And then one went to the West and one went to the Midwest, and that rivalry is completely gone. So, like Colorado is a school I think that you could think about a home and home with,
Sure.
and another one that would get you a lot of attention by doing it in the meantime.
Yep. Completely agree.
Salty says he doesn't get the whole West Coast presence thing. Schools like Alabama don't have any problem recruiting it, and they don't play within a half continent of the West Coast. It's just a flight. I mean, the thing with Notre Dame, though, is for a century they've been going to Los Angeles. So like you're used to going to Los Angeles, and it gets you physically in Los Angeles. And I think over time they've definitely seen some benefit in it.
Sure.
You might be right that Notre Dame doesn't necessarily have to be there, but at the same time, it's one of the benefits of being an independent is it
Right.
allows you to do that kind of thing if that's what you want to do. So
no, I completely.
I don't know.
Look, I completely agree with you. I agree partly with what Salty is saying, in that in this day and age, with communication the way it is, with the way travel is the way it is, the way TV the way it is, like you don't necessarily have to be out there. But Notre Dame is a coast to coast team, and I think you still want to maintain that moniker. If you're Notre Dame, you want to be the nation's team. And so you got to play on the East Coast, you got to play on the West Coast, you got to play in the South, and you got to play in the North, and you got to play in the Midwest. Like, I do think you still need to touch all of those places. And it's not just for recruiting, it's because that's who you are at Notre Dame. That's what you come to Notre Dame to do. You play anybody, anywhere, anytime, wherever. And that was Knute Rockne, what he said, and that's what they say now. And so I think that's part of it as well. Look, if recruits want to see Notre Dame, they're going to see Notre Dame. I mean, with unlimited official visits now, and with TV and all of those different things, like, you're going to see Notre Dame. But the other piece of it is, and somebody brought this up in our meeting with Marcus Freeman, and I do think that's part of it. Let's say a kid is coming from California to Notre Dame to play, right? Part of the recruiting process is, look, man, at least 2 times in your Notre Dame career, we're going to be out in the West Coast where all your friends and family are going to be able to watch you play. Yeah. You know what I mean? At least twice, maybe more. We'll see. But like, you can guarantee we're going to be out there at least twice. Like, that's part of it, man. Like, people want to play in front of their friends and family, and not everybody can afford. I realize it's NIL, and I realize all of that, but that's still a lot of travel and a lot of money and all of that kind of stuff. So kids like to go home and play.
No, I mean, for years that was a Muffet McGraw, pitch.
There you go.
Was wherever you were recruited from, at least once in your 4 years at Notre Dame, she was going to get a game back, wherever,
love that.
like in your area, and Neil Ivey has kind of continued that as well. They played New Jersey Tech a couple of years ago, Hannah Hidalgo and Olivia Miles, both from New Jersey, and Citron from New York. And then they went back out last year as well, and they played, a game literally right there in Olivia Miles's backyard in Pennsylvania. So like that's one of the things that they do is wherever you're from, they try to make that effort to get back to your hometown, so your your friends and family and stuff like that can come out and see you. And that's not necessarily the promise that the football program has made, but at the same time, like again, for a century, you've always known that every other year you were going to go to Los Angeles. And so if you were from Southern California or any part of California, at least you were going to be back in the neighborhood at least a couple of different times in your career as a Notre Dame football player.
And I think that matters. You know what I mean? I really do. I think that matters. So
because even like Manti Te'o and the guys from Hawaii, it's a heck of a lot closer to get to California than it is anywhere else in the
100%.
continental United States.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Absolutely.
Salty says, Messrs. Field, Raritan, and the Great One excel. Can any defense oppose them and still defend the run?
All right, so if you take all the hyperbole out of the question, basically what he's asking, and it's a good question, is if the passing game is what we think it could be, how dominant can the run game be? Mm-hmm. And I think that's legit. Like that's why Mike Denbrock and Marcus Freeman and anybody who watches football games is excited about this year, because you have an actual threat throwing the football, no matter who the quarterback is of the remaining two that are in this competition, because they can both sling the rock. And so that opens up a lot of things that were not opened before. Okay. Now, you can say what you want about Riley Leonard and his reluctance or his lack of or whatever, but teams are still going to stack the box. Now, he still had 17 rushing touchdowns, and so maybe it doesn't even matter that they were stacking the box. But if you are forcing teams to take account of the guys that are catching the football, and you could even add more people to this mix of people, right? So like Faison and there's other people that can catch the football, right? So if the passing game is elite, if the passing game doesn't even have to be elite, if the passing game is very good, then can you imagine what Notre Dame's run game is going to be like? We just talked about the offensive line. They got the best 1-2 punch at running back.
I think with the guys they've got in the backfield, the passing game does anywhere close to what we think it's going to do, with these receivers and the quarterback. You're going to see the most balance out of a Notre Dame offense in a long time. You're going to see maybe the most effective running game out of a Notre Dame offense that does not, non dual threat quarterback reliant running game that Notre Dame has had in a long time as well.
Yeah. I mean, one feeds off the other, that's the game of football. So I'm excited to see what this offense looks like, because I am very convinced that the offense is going to look different than really any Notre Dame offense that we've seen in quite some time at Notre Dame. And that gets me a little fired up.
This is a super chat from Tyler, and we appreciate it, Tyler. So we have to get it in here. I don't know how we're going to answer this, honestly. He says, what's the most disappointing teams every year in the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, and college football that let fans down and overhype the offseason?
I mean, I don't know if you could go with an entire year like across the board.
We'll just go 2016 for Notre Dame. Like there's like that had to have just,
no, that's
nobody
fair.
saw that coming as much as, because remember they were coming off a solid season in 2015 that ended up just short of making it to the college football playoff. They just fizzled down, in November in 2015 when Deshaun Kaiser was the quarterback. They just missed out. They lost that close game at Clemson in the rain and all that stuff. So I'll go with that.
Fair. I will say the NBA, because I don't really watch the NBA these days, but I will say the 2 years where the Chicago Bulls did not win the championship in the 90s, it was a disappointment. It was a disappointment.
Yeah, even though Michael Jordan was playing baseball at that point.
Correct. Still, and that's why, but it was a disappointment that he wasn't playing in the NBA. And so, did the Rockets really slay the giant? You know what I mean? Like, they won it both the years that Jordan was away playing baseball, and that's when Barkley and all those guys got their championship and, whatever. And that's great. Good for them, but that was disappointing. It was a letdown. I'll say that. But that's really where I stopped watching NBA was the 90s. So,
yeah.
I'm trying to think. So we did MLB. No, we haven't done MLB.
We haven't done MLB yet. And that's, I mean, any Yankees team that
wins
doesn't make the World Series, basically, because we're talking about teams that the most disappointing teams, right?
Yeah, overhype and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like
let fans down.
The Yankees went from 2009 until they finally made it back to the World Series last year, and so I know Yankees fans are always ticked off and thinking that they're supposed to be in the World Series every year. For the NFL, I got to go with my guy Christopher here. It's like every Cowboys season, the ones that end up in the playoffs end up with an early exit. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
Somebody said Minnesota Vikings. They've had a couple of really good teams and ended up getting bounced before getting to the Super Bowl.
I mean, now obvious recent seasons not counted, but if you were a Dodgers fan, there was a lot of hype surrounding the Dodgers for a long time, and they could not seal the deal.
Yep, Clayton Kershaw specifically.
Yeah. So there was a lot of letdown if you're an LA Dodgers fan, since we're talking about LA a bunch today.
Yeah.
A lot of letdown there.
Phillies last year was they won the division, looking like, big World Series threat, and then they get bounced by the wild card team from their own division, got bounced by the Mets in the playoffs.
That's true.
So
that's a good point.
It's hard to think of that stuff historically.
I know. Shoot, if you're a Florida
because if you're not
fan,
following the team,
last
one year to the next,
right.
They
go undefeated, and then all of a sudden they can't beat anybody. So yeah.
Joseph says, is the new defensive coordinator more of a zone guy? If so, is that a potential positive or negative?
So he does incorporate zone more so than Al Golden did. We saw a lot of that in spring, but I think a lot of that was because they didn't run a lot of zone before. So they were kind of going the opposite, and they were putting a bunch in. We'll see what it looks like once the season starts. I think it's a net positive just because now you can be a little bit more multiple when it comes to your defensive backfield and what you want to do. And, before, they didn't run man all the time, but they ran it the majority of the time, right? So you kind of knew as an offensive coordinator what you were going to get from Notre Dame and the coverages and things like that. So I think now you can be a little bit more difficult to predict if you're going to be in man and you're going to be in zone. And they just have to get better at zone because it doesn't do it, right? So they focused a lot of that in the spring, and there were times where it looked kind of ugly, but that's to be expected. They haven't been running it. So that's going to be
why you do it in the spring. You start. You
100%.
install. Yeah, like you
100%.
You start on it. Look, they played more man, I think, than anybody last year, at least one of the top teams in the country. And there are times when you need to be able to have more of a changeup and be able to play more zone, i.e., or for example, that would be EG, I guess. For example, in the national championship game against Ohio State, a team that wanted you to play man. They love the fact that you were going to play man-to-man. You needed to be able to play more zone against a team like Ohio State. And so I think it's not that he's necessarily more of a zone guy, as you were saying. It's that you need to have some balance and the ability to play zone when you need to play more zone. And so I think that's what this does. They started it in the spring. They'll do a little bit more of it during fall training camp, and they'll just have that in their arsenal. They'll have that in their toolbox if they need it. I don't think they're necessarily going to now become more of a zone team. It just gives them the ability to play more zone when they need to play more zone.
Yep, agreed. So, like I said, I think it's a net positive because of that, right?
Right.
So,
right.
Yep.
If there is one thing you could change on offense and defense each of the first 3 years under Marcus Freeman, man.
Gosh, can I change injuries? Is that allowed? Or are we just talking about like scheme and decision making? Well, offensively, he should have never hired Chancey Stuckey. So I'll change that offensively.
Good call. I love that one.
Yeah.
I think that would be the biggest one. I think that's really the only.
It's just such a setback.
Yeah.
Because they had a lot of talent there, and now that talent's playing elsewhere, and to my knowledge, not really producing, but whatever. So yeah, that would be my one on offense. Defensively, man, like personnel wise, can you think of anybody that was playing that shouldn't have been playing? Not really. There's really no coaching issues that I had defensively.
Yeah, it's really just injuries. Like if you
Yeah.
could take back an injury, that
Right.
would be the biggest,
Specifically to like the defensive line. Like if you
Yeah.
could have just not had the defensive line injuries, that's what I would change defensively if you
Yeah.
could do that, if that counts, Andre.
How does that change the national championship game if
Right.
if Riley Mills,
Even if you just have Riley Mills,
Yeah.
like, but if you add Batelho and, Boubacar Traore, I mean, can you imagine if you had those three guys on defense? Like, I think it's a different ball game. I really do.
Yeah.
So I guess I would say I would have tried harder to keep Al Golden. I don't know how hard Marcus Freeman tried. I'm sure he tried hard. It would.
I just think Al Golden was ultimately.
I do too.
Going to be an
Yep.
NFL defensive coordinator.
It's like if you're making me choose something, like I would have loved to have Al Golden stick around longer.
Right.
Because
I mean, look, they still got Mike Mickens, so
right.
It's a nice prize to have.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, Mike
Benjamin Morrison, that's a good one. His injury.
Yeah, man.
Again, like considering, like when you think about all the guys who went down with injury last year, especially Benjamin Morrison, preseason All-American, Riley Mills, Boubacar Traore, Jordan Batelho, like those four guys,
man, like
how, yeah. On the defensive side of the ball,
imagine?
Still made it to the national championship game.
I mean, the defense at times felt like it was held together with spit and duct tape. You know what I mean, or spit and chewing gum, or whatever the phrase is. You know what I mean. And so, if you had those four guys playing up against Ohio State, I would have loved to see it. I'll just say that. I'm not going to say they would have won or anything like that, but I would have loved to see with those four guys. Now, if Benjamin Morrison wasn't hurt, do we see, obviously we're going to see less of Leonard Moore than we saw, and he probably doesn't have his breakout season. But at the same time, I think he does work his way onto the field and is playing more as the third corner, or maybe even the second corner, depending.
Yeah, I mean, in the long run, it's kind of a nice little silver lining.
I know
to have that he got all that experience coming into this year.
No doubt. No doubt.
If Notre Dame's passing game excels this season, do you feel wide receiver recruiting target Ephraim White could be a late flip to the Irish?
No, I don't. And I don't know anything about Ephraim White. I literally know nothing about his recruitment. I don't even know if he's any good. But with the way the recruiting calendar works these days, yes, he doesn't sign until December, so you're going to have a whole season. I just am not going to put my eggs in the basket of guys that have been committed for so long flipping. It just, think
more about 27
yes,
than 26.
That's exactly right.
That's where you have to be looking.
That's exactly right. I don't get your hopes up for a 26 flip. I mean, is it possible? Sure. I just don't see it as something that is overly.
And they're still going to have a lot of young, good receivers.
Yeah, 100%.
Who are like, freshmen and sophomores who haven't played a lot this year. Some of them will get some experience this year. You expect them to be better next year. And in the meantime, you continue to strategically fill some holes with the transfer portal, just like they've done the last couple years. Because that's like until they get the wide receiver thing kind of rolling, which I do think that is going to happen.
Me too.
Not expecting miracles in the short term. I think it's more about, look at how defensive line recruiting has turned just in this cycle so far. And I think that that wide receiver is the next, and they're getting good guys, but I realize everybody wants the great guys, but look, some guys you get and it doesn't work out. Like everybody thought that Tobias Merriweather was supposed to be the guy. So just because his star rating is a little bit higher doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work out anyway. So
agreed. And if Notre Dame was convinced that Ephraim White was a potential flip, would they be bringing in all these other wide receivers, this past weekend? and introducing him to Rocket Ishmael. Like, I don't think so, personally. So, I mean, we'll see. Why is Joe talking about garlic, Parmesan cheese, and beer?
I have no idea what's going on with some of these people.
I don't know what's going on there. Just curious. It's all good stuff. I just don't know what we're talking about.
Okay, Mark's question. NFL careers average 3 years. Do you see mid-draft players staying in 4 years to get 4 years of NIL? Also, like Michigan and Ohio State recently being NIL enticed to stay. Can/will SEC teams follow this model?
The overall answer is yes. You're going to see players staying longer, 100%. And we just talked about, it was a rapid fire question about the kid who already played 4 years of college basketball and suing the NCAA for a fifth. Like, yeah, they're going to be longer because if you look at college, there's way more college roster spots than there are NFL roster spots. And so if you're guaranteed to get NIL money, why would you not try to stay as long as possible?
Look at a guy like Malachi Fields.
Right.
You know,
100%.
probably could have been a mid-round guy.
Yes.
This year, but he stayed in school, got some nice NIL money from Notre Dame, and here he is. He's got a chance to really elevate his draft stock this year.
So yes, 100%. I think you're going to see it in football. I think you're going to see it in basketball. You know, I think you're going to see it across the board. I mean, look, Olivia Miles, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, she could have gone in the top 2 or top 3 of the draft, but she's going the NIL route and transferring and making more money than she'll make as a rookie in the WNBA because, you know, they're doing the CBA and there's going to be more money for the WNBA the following year. She's going to make more money. What you have a finite amount of time as an athlete to make money. I don't have any issue with these college athletes trying to stick around and make more money. I have no issue with that at all because someday they're all going to be schmucks like us working, a 9-to-5 job or whatever. And their athletic days are going to be behind them. And that minute amount of time to make that money will be gone. So make it while you can. Make it while you can.
I think that there's more incentive to stay in school now than there ever has been before.
Absolutely.
Because of that.
Yep. Agreed.
Like, once you get into the 5th round, really, and even like 4th round, it's a little bit borderline at that point. But it's specifically, you get down to around the 5th round, there are no guarantees that you're going to make a roster spot. And, like Mark said, average lifespan is a little bit over 3, average career span is a little over 3 years in the NFL. So why not make some money first, have kind of a nice nest egg to get started on and have the chance to raise your draft stock in the process.
Yep. Look, if I would counsel my own child to do that if he had that opportunity to make NIL money. Now, NIL hasn't dropped down to Division II yet, but if it ever did, I would tell my kid, stick around. If he has an opportunity to grad transfer someplace and make some NIL money, I'm going to tell him to do it, because, again, your athletic career is finite. Do what you can in that amount of time.
What does Jaden Osbury need to do to raise his profile to the level of Drake Bowen and Kingston Villamu Assa?
That's tough because I'm pretty sure your starters are going to be those two. And so what does he need to do? He needs to do well enough in fall camp to be a starter. And I think that's a hell of a hill to climb with Bowen and Kingston kind of penciled in there, at the moment. So I think that's a tough ask. Jaden Osbury can be a guy that can come in packages. He can be a hell of a special teams player. He can be all of those things. And in most teams, he would be a starter. He's just not a starter on this team. And I just don't know that there's anything he can actually do to usurp Bowen and Kingston.
That's exactly right. I mean, he's literally got, I think, like the two guys that Salty mentions, Drake Bowen and Kingston Villamu Assa, literally two of the best linebackers in the entire nation, like interior linebackers in the entire nation. So that's a big ask to try to get to that level. He can, as Vince said, he can still be a great special teams player and have a lot of opportunities there and get in, passing situations and those kind of things and still be a really big contributor, but I think it's a tough ask to try to get to that level where Bowen and KVA are right now. Because don't forget, you still have Jaden Sneed in the mix as well.
Yeah.
They're all going to play a part. They're all going to be out there, but to different degrees in terms of how big the roles are. And I just don't see Osbury's role being as big as those other two you mentioned.
Right.
Joe wants to know if Greathouse and Faison go to the draft after this year.
I doubt it. Remember Faison's also here as a lacrosse player, and so I could see him sticking around to play lacrosse. And I
think Greathouse has a better chance.
Yes,
like if he, because there's a lot of hype on Greathouse.
There is
right now, but like with his size, his speed, like the hand skill, the whole thing, like just there's more prototypical NFL type, receiver body and skills there. I think so. If he comes close to what we think that he can be, I think that he does have a decision to make. I think Faison is still going to be a pretty good contributor of his own on this team, but I just feel like Greathouse and Fields specifically, I just feel like those are going to be the two main producers.
Two names, yeah. And it just depends. Like, I don't know what the draft class looks like from a wide receiver position. I think that comes into play. NIL is going to come into play. Like all of those things. Like if is he a day 2 guy? Is he an early day 3 guy? Like all of that comes into play. So is it possible? Sure. If I was going to put money on it or something like that, I would say they both come back for their senior year.
I would agree with that. All right, trying to speak English here. Mm-hmm. I'm just making noises. Noises are just independently coming out of my mouth right now.
Okay. Speaking of noises independently coming out of your mouth, you had your reunion over the weekend. Were these guys that you were overseas speaking Russian with?
Various languages. Most of them were Russian. There was at least a couple German linguists there as well. But yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So did you guys exchange any words in Russian?
It's funny. There was very little actual languages being spoken.
Okay. I don't know why I was curious about that, but
it was more reminiscing about all the terrible things that we did.
That's fair. That is fair.
That's right. Yes. There was a lot of that. All right, Vince, we have come to the point in the show where I ask you, are you ready for rapid fire?
On that happy note, absolutely ready for some rapid fire. There appears to be a theme this day with rapid fire.
There is a lot of things just started flowing out of my brain as I thought of one question. Other sort of related questions came out of it as well, and everyone will find that out here in just a minute.
Yep.
So Riley Leonard passed for 2,861 yards in 16 games last season. Scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that either CJ Carr or Kenny Minchey, depending on which becomes the starter, will surpass that number during the regular season this fall?
So this is a really, really good question. And in projecting stats is what I'm most terrible about. But I'm going to give it a shot, obviously. I think that I was trying to look up passing offenses for the whole season. Like what are we talking about here? So
Sam Hartman,
2689.
Okay. So he's just a little bit under it, actually, as an example.
So 3,000 yards would rank 56th for yards passing in the country last year in 2024. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that means 55 quarterbacks or offenses. Cause I realize there's backups and all of those different things. So 55 teams threw for more than 3,000 yards. I feel like Notre Dame, whoever the quarterback is going to be over that based on what we know about who these guys are and the projection of who the wide receiving core is. And so on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm like a 9.5 here. I feel like 3,000 yards is the floor for the year as far as passing is concerned.
Yeah, I'm at a 9. I'm very, very confident. Like some other people are saying 10. They're very like even more in. Toons is in an 8. We got a lot of 10s that people are in here though, and this is typically the way it goes. Everyone goes all in because it's like sky's the limit with this whole thing. But like neither of these guys is going to run for 900 yards like Riley Leonard did.
Right.
Last year.
Oh, I agree with that too. Yeah.
And that was obviously a big part of his game and part of the balance. So like, I mean, you're talking about over 3,700 total yards that he had.
Right. And that's important. That's important because that's very, very important. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so like I went back and looked. Ian Book in 2018, his first full season. I guess it wasn't a full season,
quite a full
even
season.
Technically, but still he played most of the season. He was a little over 2,600 yards. So he was just a couple hundred yards shy. And we expect whoever the guy is going to be, the guy like, so I'm just very confident that the guy that ends up being the starter is going to be right in the 3,000 yard ballpark. So I'm at a 9 on this. You said you're at a 9.5, like very confident.
Yeah. I will say
this is in 12 games. This is in 12 games
this is
before
regular
they get to the playoffs.
Yeah. I will say this, Anglevator, maybe. Sorry if I butchered your name, my man. But he says throw for 300, run for 200. That's 500 a game. I will tell you this: if they do that, they will have potentially one of the top offenses in the country because only 2 teams averaged more than 500 yards per game, and that was Miami, Florida, and Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
So Ole Miss, as it were. And so everyone else in the country was under 500 yards. So if Notre Dame can be 500 yards, they're cooking. They're cooking with some serious gas.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like throw for 3. Like,
I mean, that'd be great. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
That
might be a little ambitious though.
That's a little ambitious. Yeah, that's a high bar.
Now that could end up being what the averages are when it's all said and done. They're not necessarily going to hit both of those marks every game, but you might have some games where you throw for 400 and run for 150. And you might have some games where it's the opposite, where you run for closer to 300 and you only pass for 150, 175 yards.
That would, like I said, that would be great. Only 2 teams average 500 or more. So that would be a hell of an offensive season.
Correct. Leonard had 38 total touchdowns last year. Over under 29.5 total touchdowns for this year's quarterbacks. I'm allowing you to combine them.
Oh man,
based on the conversation that we had yesterday.
So we're right. So we're allowing them to combine for passing and rushing, right? So
yes.
I'm gonna say over. I think they got a chance to get over. I'm not saying that they're going to eclipse what Riley Leonard was able to do, but I think they can get to 30 in a combined fashion of running and throwing. I'm gonna take the over.
So it was interesting. I went back and looked over the last few years. Drew Pine, 22 touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns.
24.
That same season, Buckner threw for 3, ran for 4. So that's 31 between the two of them right there. 2021, Jack Cohn had a combined 27 with Buckner 6 more. So that's 33 right there.
If Buckner and Pine can do it,
That's what I'm saying.
These other 2 can do it.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And especially like if Carr is the starter, and again, going to the conversation we had yesterday where maybe Kenny Minchie is, whatever kind of package guy, you could see him adding a few more rushing touchdowns or something like that. Like I'm going to be over as well. 29.5 was the number, over under total touchdowns for the 2 of them. I'm going to be over on that one.
Yep. I'm trying not to be too optimistic here, Sean. But the questions that you're asking are forcing me to be optimistic.
So we do have some unders. Scott says under. Christopher says J Love is going to go off this season. Well, J Love went off last season. Remember, he had 17 rushing touchdowns last season, and so did Riley Leonard. And Riley Leonard also threw 21 touchdown passes. Now, granted, that's in 16 games, but, so again, Leonard had 38 total touchdowns last year, and Jeremiah Love still had 17 rushing touchdowns.
Right. Did he have any receiving touchdowns last year?
He might have had one or two. Let me check here real quick. Yeah, he had 2.
Okay, so 19 total for him.
So 19 total. Yeah, so look,
this offense is going to score points, and there's going to be points to go around.
Yeah.
And I will be the first one to say that in the first few games, teams are going to stack the box to try to stop Jeremiah Love. And so it's going to be an opportunity for the quarterback to get some points and spread them out.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, I think that's the first thing teams are going to do this season is try to stack the box, try to take away the running game, because they're going to try to put the game on a young, inexperienced quarterback, especially you go on the road, to open up the season to a place like Miami. I think that's got to be the game plan, is you're going to try to do that. And then it's going to be, one, on the coaching staff, not to put him in a situation where he has to, feel like he's got to do more than what he's capable of. But 2, it's going to be on the quarterback to show that he can do it. And I think that he'll be able to. Leonard ran for 17 touchdowns last season. Over under 6.5 combined rushing touchdowns for Karin Minchie this season.
This one's tough. Because 6.5 seems like a decent amount. Obviously, you're comparing him to 17, which they're never going to get anywhere near that, obviously. So, let's just get that out of the way. I just feel like they're going to be a throw-first team. And so as far as the quarterback is concerned, or they're going to be handing off to 4-24. And so I'm going to take the under here. I will be pessimistic in this regard, but it wouldn't overly surprise me if they did hit the over.
Yeah, again, I feel like people are like a little bit too overconfident in this, because I see a lot of people chiming in the chat saying over. Like, the rushing to Leonard having 17 last year was a massive number. And kind of going to the argument we were just having, if Jeremiah Love is going to have all these touchdowns and you're keeping Jadarian Price happy as well, where are all these rushing touchdowns coming from? Right? Because they're not Riley Leonard. It is either going to be Kenny Minchie or CJ Carr. And like going back to 2021, when Buckner was the package quarterback, he had 3 rushing touchdowns that year. Jack Cohn had 2, so that's 5. Drew Pine in 2022 had 2, and Buckner had 4, in the time he was a starter. So that's 6. Now, obviously, Buckner's number would have been up if he had stayed healthy all year, but that also, affects some of those other numbers. So the bottom line in this is, I think that there are too many mouths to feed. And with as good as both the passing game and your running backs are going to be, I think it's going to take away from some opportunities for the quarterbacks. So I think it'll be right around this number, which is why I set it at 6.5, but I think it's going to be under. I think it's going to be 5 or 6, basically, total for the quarterbacks.
Yep. Like I said, when in doubt, they're going to hand the ball off. They're not going to have the quarterbacks running the football. Like, I just don't see that. Why would you take that chance?
Right.
With those two. You know
You've
what I mean?
got Jeremiah Love. Why do you need to take the chance with the quarterback?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Put them, get in your 2 running back personnel.
We haven't even talked about Aeneas Williams, Javon Payne, any of those guys.
Right. It's not going to be a run fest like it was when Riley Leonard had the football in the red zone. It's just going to be different. Now, even if Kenny Minchie is the quarterback in the red zone, you still have that option, obviously, for him to keep the ball and run it in. I just feel like there's going to be more of a traditional run game.
Absolutely agree. All right, let's play Guess the Over-Under season win total. And I was thinking about this, Vince. Yeah. We really haven't done a bad team so far.
This is true.
So we're going to do a bad team today. And we're going to guess the over-under win total. It's going to be Purdue. We're going to guess Purdue's season
old Boilermakers.
Yes.
All right.
So here's the schedule.
There we
go. They open with Ball State, and then they have Southern Illinois, And then it gets a little bit more interesting after that.
Yes, it does.
In consecutive weeks, they host USC, they go to Notre Dame, they host Illinois, they go to Minnesota and then Northwestern back-to-back weeks. They host Rutgers, they go to Michigan, they host Ohio State, they go to Washington, and they close the regular season Thanksgiving weekend. This will be a Friday night game, actually, against Indiana in the old bucket game. So that is like, I feel like for a second year, like Purdue is going to have one of the toughest schedules of the entire.
They really do.
Like nobody else in the Big Ten is playing this kind of schedule, but Purdue.
They play arguably the two. Well, no, because they don't have Oregon. So they play two of the three best West Coast teams in the Big Ten, in my opinion, and then they play two of the best teams in the Midwest in Ohio State and Michigan, right?
Yes.
So it's like,
yes, Ohio State and Michigan, and oh, by the way,
back to back,
your rival that just went to the college football playoff last year.
Like their end of the season, their November is a murderer's row. Let's be honest. Like you have to go to the big house, you host Ohio State, you have to go to Washington. Whether they're going to be good or not, we'll see. But they have to go to Washington, and then they host IU. Like those last four games are legit.
Absolutely.
Not to mention the fact you've got USC and Notre Dame back to back too, just for fun. So, yeah, this is going to be a tough schedule. They're going to be lucky to make it out of this one alive.
Well, this game is getting harder to play. We might not be able to play it anymore because they changed the win totals format. Instead of like you used to be able to go to each team, and like click on the team without like seeing what the win total was.
Sure,
and it would, show you, like 6.5, 7.5, whatever. So now, it's like to win X amount of games, like these teams to win 6 games, these teams to win 10 games. Oh, hold it. Here it is. I just had to scroll down a little bit farther. Fortunately, it's still around. Okay. So what's your guess on Purdue?
So I'm somewhere between 3.5 and 4.5. I
think 4.5 is too high. 3.5. I think it's either 3.5 or 2.5.
I get it. Because I think they're going to beat Ball State, and I think they're going to beat Southern Illinois. That's 2. And then are there 2 other wins in this? 2 to 3 other wins on this schedule? I don't know that there are. Can they beat Northwestern? Can they beat Rutgers?
Yeah. I mean, the easiest game theoretically after Ball State and Southern Illinois are those 2 games, Northwestern and Rutgers.
The other ones are not. Like Illinois is supposed to be an up and coming team. You never know what you're going to get with Minnesota and the belt buckle coach. Those last 4 are all losses to me. USC and Purdue, or USC and Notre Dame are losses. So how many are they going to win between Rutgers, Northwestern, Ball State, Southern Illinois? They could be 4-0 in those 4. So I'm setting 3.5.
I'm going 3.5.
I like it.
I'm going 3.5.
3.5. That's where I'm at too.
Okay. All right. So here we are.
Okay.
Purdue, we're guessing the over-under season win total for the Purdue Boilermakers, and the number is 3.5. Nailed it.
That's terrible.
Man.
Can you?
Poor Purdue.
It would be so hard to root for a team that your projected win total.
I know.
Like maybe you'll win 4, but you're probably going to win 3 or less. Like that's what the Vegas odd makers think. You know what I mean? Like, holy smokes. That's tough.
Yeah.
That's tough, man.
And you're going to pay to go watch that.
Man. The friends and family section will be full, and that's about it.
I'm pretty sure USC goes to USC does. USC goes to both Notre Dame and Purdue this year.
Yep.
So that's an interesting little.
That's why they don't want to play Notre Dame anymore. They go to Indiana too many times.
That's right. And they're still not playing actual Indiana.
Of course not.
Deion Sanders on a podcast this week called out the pre-draft rumors about his son Shedeur. Do you buy or sell stuff like this as the reason Shedeur slid to the 5th round of the draft?
It's one of the reasons. It's a huge buy for me. It's absolutely one of the reasons. The other reason was that he pretty much was terrible in those interviews. Like, he didn't take him. It sounds like he didn't take him seriously, especially for teams that he didn't want to go to. And that's embarrassing. That's unprofessional. It's embarrassing that teams didn't want to have anything to do with that. And then you add on to the fact that you've got Deion constantly in the media talking about his kid, constantly saying, well, I'm going to be in these meetings and, all of these different things. Absolutely. That's why he slid, because people don't want to deal with that crap.
Yeah.
And, he ended up going obviously to the Browns in the 5th round. It's easy to cut a 5th rounder, by the way. If the Browns are annoyed, it's easy to cut a 5th rounder. So 100% huge buy for me.
Yeah, I feel like the threat of the sideshow is a thing. It just like more and more, and like how far past the draft are we now? And it's like, oh, here's Deion again, and now we're going to talk about it. And why would you, as an NFL team, why would you want that?
Right. And
why would you want any part of this guy with a big megaphone just criticizing potentially everything you do? Because now what happens when it gets into the season and Deion's complaining about the fact that Shedeur's not playing and he should be playing? And, even if he does end up playing, like, oh, the play calling stinks and they're not, setting him up for success. And it's just always going to be something. Yeah.
It's going to be a bad look for Deion too, because is his Colorado team going to be undefeated at that time?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you have a day job, my guy. Like, it's not being your son's agent.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it was very underplayed by the media, the Deion effect on Shedeur.
And the reason it was underplayed is because no one wants to get on his bad side. They all want to be friends with Deion.
Right, because
they all want that in. They want that connection.
Right.
And so nobody wanted to call him out. I think that's what happened.
Right.
During, and obviously you had Mel Kiper going completely over the top, completely in on Shedeur. And that's his right, obviously, but he went overboard with it. But I think that's why you didn't hear, and like the media thought one thing, and obviously NFL executives thought something completely different, because like NFL guys, they don't have to come out and stand at a microphone and talk about why they didn't draft Shedeur, because there are a million other guys they didn't draft as well. Like, they talk about who you did draft and you don't have to worry about it
100%.
But that's why I think that there was no like pre-media feed, pushback, because of the fact that we saw what happened when Deion took over and he's calling out Ed Werder. And it's like, do you believe? Do you believe? Well, I don't have to believe. That's not my job in the media to believe in Deion and Colorado.
Right.
Yeah.
And I didn't believe, and I was right. So there you go.
There you go.
I mean,
nailed it.
It is what it is. Like, if I was in charge of an NFL team, you got enough headaches, man. Like, NFL teams have enough headaches with what they've got going on. Why would you want to invite that headache, that circus that is going to be a circus? Like, most of the headaches that NFL teams worry about are ones that aren't necessarily on purpose. You know what I mean? Like, just roster issues and things like that. You're inviting a known issue, a known headache into your building. Why would you do that?
Yep.
Of course, Cleveland did. Not surprising.
Exactly. The NBA fined Minnesota Timberwolves star Anthony Edwards for dropping an F-bomb in a post-game press conference during the Western Conference Finals. Is that fair or foul?
It's fair, because, again, in this day and age, those things are live streamed on radio stations and all of these other things. And look, there is an FCC that does exist. And I'm not going to pull the old Charles Barkley, you're a role model thing. Like, I'm not going to go down that road per se, but there is a level of professionalism that you should have. And if you don't have a big enough vocabulary that you're dropping F-bombs, then that's
fair.
a problem.
That's fair. On the one hand, I agree with that, because like it's one thing for us to sit here and do a show every day. Anyone who steps in front of a microphone, that's going to be broadcast wherever. But at the same time, these guys are adults. They're not in college.
Sure.
Like, there's no guarantee that it's necessarily going out live to the world. Most of it's going over the internet as opposed to, being broadcast on a TV station live or a radio station or whatever. There are 7-second delays. Everyone is supposed to have a 7-second delay when when you've got that live kind of stuff. So you should be able to take care of it. I feel like it's a little bit much. These are grown men. They're adults. I agree with the part that, like, as a grown man and an adult, you should be able to have a selective enough vocabulary that you shouldn't have to. But there's also emotion involved.
Sure, I get that.
So
believe me, I get it. You know me. You and I have talked millions of times. I swear all the time, and I've almost sworn on this show before.
As do I.
Right. But I also can keep it professional, at least 99.9% of the time, and, control myself when it comes to my language, whether, like, Notre Dame losing a game and I have to come on right immediately afterward for a post-game show. Like, I'm fired up. Like, I want to throw a couple F-bombs out there potentially. You know what I mean? Like, but you have to be professional, and you're getting paid to be a professional. Like, that's just my opinion. Because I have this conversation with kids all the time with their language, and it's like, okay, well, you said this to this person, this adult. How would it look if I said that to my boss? Like, how would that look? What does that look like? And they're like, oh yeah, that's probably not a good look. I said exactly right. So, like, I have that conversation all the time with kids. And so I guess that's kind of more where this is coming from too.
I mean, that's funny because, like, you were just talking about, like, the reunion that I had with my old Army friends and all that stuff. And one of the guys, like, we can joke about it 30 years later. They're like, there's a certain way you can talk amongst your friends, but when you're talking about a superior, like, especially in a military setting, there are certain things you can't say. And he crossed a couple of lines, and then, like, in a setting where other people who were even more superior heard it, and there was, as you can imagine, a lot of trouble that came. That's why you have to, just have to learn, when you can and you can't.
Yes, so that's all I'm saying. It's just it's part of being an adult, and it's part of being a professional and growing up and all of those things. So
true. Very true. But I guess, when you're making millions,
I know
probably a drop in the bucket anyway, in terms of what he's actually going to have to pay. So
100%. Yes.
The New York Knicks fired head coach Tom Thibodeau yesterday after he led the team to its first conference finals in 25 years and also led the Knicks to the playoffs in 4 of his 5 years as head coach after a couple decades of futility, basically. So my question to you is, what would be the NFL equivalent? Like, what NFL coach would have to be fired for the equivalent of Thibodeau getting fired? And we're going to do this for NFL, college football, and Major League Baseball. What would be the NFL equivalent? I've got an idea in my head. I'll let you go first if you've got something.
How about the NFL? The first thing that came to my mind, because we did kind of briefly talk about it in the show today, would be the Vikings head coach.
Yeah.
What do you think about
good
that?
One. O'Connell. Yeah. That would be a good one after, the year that he had last year. Maybe Dan Campbell after years and years of futility. You get to the playoffs a couple years in a row, and all of a sudden you can't advance, and so now you're gonna, change course or something like that.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Sean McDermott is the one I went with, the Buffalo Bills. Coach. They've been to the playoffs 7 of the last 8 years after missing the playoffs 17 consecutive years, but they can't get to the Super Bowl. It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
And like the thing with Thibodeau is, like, and I know you don't follow the NBA very closely, but I think to most people who watched, like, they beat the Boston Celtics in the last round before they, I guess, in the conference semifinals. So a lot of people, I think, considered that, well, you've already overachieved. You beat the Celtics, the defending champs, the number 2 seed, and all that stuff. The Knicks brass obviously feels like somehow they underachieved by losing to the Pacers in the conference finals. Well, I think most other observers feel pretty strongly that they actually overachieved just to get to where they got this year.
But look, I don't follow the NBA that closely, but I do know that the Knicks have been awful for the last few decades, like since the 90s, since Patrick Ewing and, that whole, like, I think of the Knicks and the Pacers, and I think of Reggie Miller And
Right.
that whole
The joke in the garden and
yeah,
all that.
100%.
Yeah.
Like that was like 30 years ago.
Yeah.
It's a long time ago, Sean.
He just led them to their first 50-win season in 30 years.
Right. How do you
got
can
fired.
a guy like that?
Right.
I was actually shocked when I saw that headline a couple days ago. I was shocked. I was like, really? Like the Knicks have been nothing, and now they're something.
They had 13 head coaches. Jeff Van Gundy was the last guy to get him to a conference finals. 13 head coaches between Van Gundy and Thibodeau, and they fired the guy because you lost in the conference finals. Amazing. Amazing.
There has to be more to it, right? Like, was he mean to secretaries or something?
Or it's just bad ownership.
Yeah,
which would explains why they were so bad for as long as they were to begin with.
That's fair. That's fair. It was a terrible decision as far as I can tell. With the information that I have, terrible decision. Terrible.
See, Christopher says the Ravens coach, John Harbaugh, but I don't think that's a good comparison because he's won a Super Bowl. Yeah. Because you could say that maybe with Mike Tomlin as well, but Tomlin's won a Super Bowl. So we're kind of limiting it to guys who haven't achieved the ultimate prize, because those guys have at least won Super Bowls, but they're kind of they're both on the backside of that right now. They're still consistently getting to the playoffs, but they're not winning once they get there. But they've at least got a championship to show for it. College football, I came up with two names.
Okay.
One, I'll give mine first and then see what yours is. Mine would be like Brian Kelly when he was still at Notre Dame.
Sure.
If they would have
consistent 10 wins,
they would have fired him. Yeah, you're getting there, you're winning these 10 games, you're getting to the playoffs, but you're not going anywhere. That would have been kind of, I think, my biggest college guy.
That's fair. No, I think that's a good one. Because Brian Kelly didn't deserve to get fired.
Yeah.
Right. He left on his own. Now, I think that was a good decision and it worked out well for everyone. But they would not have had cause to fire him from an on the field standpoint. They wouldn't have.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's a really good one, actually. How about 3 years from now when Kenny Dillingham continues to take Arizona State to the playoffs and they're
but not go anywhere?
They're a blue blood and then he gets canned.
Yeah. That's a good one. He thinks they're a blue blood.
James
Franklin at Penn State was the other one.
That is actually a good one. I'm trying to remember,
and especially now because there's a ton of hype on Penn State.
There is so much hype
this year, and if they don't probably at least get to a national championship game, I think it's going to be a disappointment for them.
If they don't win 10 games, it's a massive disappointment.
Yeah, with the schedule they've got,
with
everybody they've got back, and
I mean, they've got all-world Drew Aller at quarterback, and they've got, Franklin, who's everybody's best friend, as the head coach. And so, I don't know how they're not a national championship team.
Yep. D-Hawk, this is one I thought of as well, a little bit farther back. Tony Dungy getting canned by Tampa Bay. And then, of course, he goes to the Colts, ends up winning a Super Bowl with the Colts, but Gruden won the Super Bowl with Tampa Bay after Dungy got fired.
Do you remember all that? That was a wild situation. They can Tony Dungy and then they pay the Raiders to trade for Gruden. Remember that?
Yeah.
It was a weird scenario on how he went from the Raiders to the Bucks. And I just remember thinking they're trading a coach. What? I just remember thinking that was so wild back then.
Yep. I agree. What about baseball? Is there a current baseball guy that would apply?
Well, it would have been the Dodgers before they won the championship. So obviously that one's a no-go at this point. I'm trying to think of a team that consistently, makes the playoffs, like the manager of the Rays, I suppose. But I don't know if they've changed. I don't know enough about some of these other teams that continuously make the playoffs but don't win World Series.
Yeah. Rob Thompson in Philadelphia.
Okay.
If it goes a little bit long. Now, granted, he took him to the World Series just a few years ago when they fired Joe Girardi in the middle of the season. He got him to the World Series, but they've kind of, again, they made the playoff. They won the division and were kind of a World Series favorite. I think one of the two favorites last year, and they end up getting bumped by the Mets in the playoffs. So if they keep getting to the playoffs, but can't go anywhere, I think that maybe is a comp there. Yeah. Craig Counsell, when he was with Milwaukee, if they had fired him, because it felt like they were always overachieving in the fact that they were getting,
but they never got the division, and they They had some good teams in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
And,
or like any,
yeah,
like Art Howe, like any former Oakland A's manager, basically.
Right. No, that's actually, those are all really, really good. Those are all really, really good. I'm trying to think of anybody else that we can even use as a comp.
Buck Showalter is a former one because like he was like Yankees. He got replaced by Joe Torre, like right before the like the Yankees big run. And he's kind of like Showalter was always a pretty good turnaround, stabilize guy, but could never really go any farther, whether it was the Yankees, the Mets, the Baltimore Orioles, even in Arizona, I think to an extent, like he could get you to the playoffs, but never really, could get to the World Series.
Right. What about Terry Francona? Like,
but he turned like he won 3 titles with the Red Sox.
Right, but then he went to Cleveland and took him to the World Series.
Right.
I don't remember how he exited Cleveland. Obviously, he's with the Reds now.
That was pretty much on his own.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was funny because I was watching, the Cubs play the Reds the other day, and I see Terry Francona in the dugout, and I'm like, wait a minute. I guess he's the manager of the Reds now. Like, so I didn't follow his, different movement and all that kind of thing. But yeah.
Christopher Galloway says, how many coaches have the Steelers had in the past 40 years? It would basically, I think in the last 40, it would be 3, because I think Noel would sneak in there maybe.
Okay. All right.
And then Cowher, and then Tomlin. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Tom Kelly with the Twins.
I don't follow Minnesota baseball well enough, and I don't think they've made the playoffs in quite a while off the top of my head.
I can't think of like when Kelly was the manager, but probably so, because like the Twins were always like they would go to the playoffs. The times they would get to the playoffs, then they would lose to the Yankees in the first round.
I guess they were in the playoffs in 23.
Yeah,
well, they've been to the playoffs a lot more often than I give them credit for.
Yeah, but now it's Tom Kelly.
When was Tom Kelly the manager?
That's what I'm trying to remember of when his years were. It's been a while, I think.
If you give me the years, I can tell you if they were in the playoffs.
He is 74 now. So he was the I mean, he won 2 World Series. You can't include him. He was the manager when they won in 87 and 91. So no, you can't include Tom Kelly.
Oh no. Gosh, no. See, yeah. You can tell I'm not up on my Twins baseball history because I had no idea who the manager was.
Before the Royals, he was the last small market manager to win a championship.
Because then, obviously they won the World Series in 91, but then they made the playoffs in 02, 03, 04, 06, 09, 10, 17, 19, 20, 23. Like, they're in the playoffs more often than not. Now, they suck when they get there.
Right.
Because it was, let's see, 03 lost 1-3, 04 lost 1-3, 06 0-3, 09 0-3, 0-3, 10 0-3. Like, they're not good. They don't even win games, period, let alone series. But
exactly.
But they're there. They got invited.
Yep. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for today. Good questions in the mailbag portion of the show today, and some good stuff, I think, there toward the end as well. You'll be back on Friday, right?
Last time I checked. Yep. Back on Friday. And I'll be in a great mood because the last day of school is tomorrow.
Yes.
At least the last day with kids. I still have to go.
Party time.
But,
All right. Smack that like button before you leave us, and we will talk to you mañana on IB Nation Sports Talk.